Okay, well, good morning and welcome to everybody who's chosen to join us this morning. We're going to be running at the latest edition of our webinar series, which will be on NLP, which is a high performance mindset. I'm Charles Edwards, principal of the Heritage Partnership, a partner practice of St. James's Place, and I'll be your host for this morning. This session will be recorded and the recording will be made available on demand after the event. I'm delighted to be joined by our guest speaker, Sylvia Fernandez, who is the founder and CEO of VIA Frontiers. We're going to be talking about Neuro Linguistic Programming, and this is a course which is based outside of Singapore. Sylvia will share more about her background later on. So in terms of introduction and the agenda for this morning, Sylvia will run through various different fundamentals of NLP, how it works, and how it can be applied to many areas of our lives. After that, we've allocated 20 minutes towards the end for a Q&A. This is when you can type in your questions into the chat box, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. We appreciate that everybody's time is precious, and it is a Friday, so we will certainly look to wrap up within the hour. I aim to do so by 12:30. Before we get started, some of us may know about NLP, some of us may not. So let's just run a quick poll to understand how familiar we are on the subject of NLP. We'll just give that another 15 seconds for people to respond. Okay, got a few messages coming through. Okay, so it sounds as though we've got a mixed array of experience around the topic. So I think that brings us nicely on to Sylvia. So without further ado, I shall introduce Sylvia and I'll let you take it away, Sylvia.
Thanks so much, Charles. Oh my God, I'm so excited that not so many of you know about NLP. So it means I can mess with fresh brains. That's what I say. So hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm so excited to meet you all here. And can you see my screen? Just give me a thumbs up, everybody. Yeah. Alrighty. So for those of you who don't know me, I was born in KL and I migrated to Sydney in 1994. I'm currently living in Singapore, and this is where I've been based since 2007. I was a banker before, and I started my behavioral change business in 2002 in Sydney. Having come from a multicultural background myself, I suppose this really lends credence to my ability to, work with different cultures around. Most often I am in the Asia Pacific region. So my main business is in training, coaching, and facilitating, mostly B2B in corporates. Today I do some B2C as well because of COVID and lots of people need help individually. And most of, the 19 years that I've been practicing has been to do with culture alignment, culture change, leadership, coaching, and creating high performance teams. So there you have it. A little bit about the methodology. I'm a master trainer of Neuro Linguistic Programming, and I mesh it today. I mesh NLP with a whole bunch of other things, tools that I have picked up along the way. And this experience has allowed me to create what I call rapid success technology. So, results that you achieve are really fast. And to me, I know people are time poor. So this was something in the back of my mind, always bugging me about time. People ask me, how long will it take? In the meantime, when I moved to Singapore in 2007 and the Asian financial crisis hit, I decided I was going to spend that year writing a book. So I'm also an author of Bye Bye Black Cat, Turn Your Luck Around and Realize Opportunities. I self-published that in 2014. And, I am a great believer that you create your own luck. It doesn't just come to you. So there you have it, some background about who I am. So most of you don't know anything about NLP. So what is NLP? The name has been bandied about, these acronyms, since the late 70s when it was created by two geniuses a professor of linguistics, and a computer scientist. So neuro stands for the mind-body connection. You know, we have a mind, we have a body, we have a spirit. And so linguistics came from the professor of linguistics, Dr. John Grinder. John Grinder was someone who, you know, obviously knew language well. And so he picked up the language and patterns that were used by 3 therapists who were way ahead of their game in their industries. One was a family therapist, a Gestalt therapist, and a hypnotherapist. So from these 3 people who didn't know that they themselves were geniuses, you know, Dr. John Grinder, you know, picked up the language patterns that these therapists were using. And what he did was he coded it and put it into some kind of structure for people like you and me today to learn, you know, from books and from attending courses. So that's the language part of NLP. The programming is where individuals don't realize we are programmed, you know, emotionally and mentally from the time we're young. Most of the time this programming is installed between 0 and 12 years old. So people don't realize that through a process of osmosis, we just take on family patterns. We take on what our parents say and do. We take on what we hear from neighbors and uncles and aunts and friends, you know, relatives. So we don't realize that these systems that come into us are just taken on without any question. And so by osmosis, we install them in the unconscious, and that's the very thing that drives us. Okay, so that's where Richard Bandler, who was a computer scientist, you know, his mind was trained in programs, and he understood what these 3 therapists were doing, and basically he elicited these programs, understood how to break the pattern if the emotional program wasn't working, and reinstall new programs. So, you know, henceforth, the whole field of NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming, was, you know, created. That was in the late 70s, and we're in the year 2021, and I'm still doing this 20 years later. So you can imagine how relevant and how amazing, you know, results we achieve, and that's why I'm still doing it. So what makes NLP so successful? And these are some, you know, questions that Charles fielded to me before this session. And I thought it was really great because it's coming from someone who really, you know, wanted to understand NLP better. And perhaps all of you are asking the same questions. So why is NLP, you know, sort of always, you know, when someone says, what do you do? And I say, I'm an NLP trainer, and they say, wow, you know, why? What's that wow about? The key success factors are, first of all, we do not work in content. So let's just say you came from, and this is a glaringly horrible example, but I want to give it because it's at the end and the extreme of the dichotomy between, you know, a positive versus negative, you know, way of life that someone could lead. So if you were abused in your past, okay, perhaps when you were growing up, I don't need to know any of that. Okay, that's what we call content. The content of your experience is private to you, you know, so this is how I could train 1,000 people in the same corporate, you know, and that would be fine. No one would need to divulge any of their personal matters. Okay, so I'm trained to pick up the context and the process and the structure of what, you know, of how people experience life and how they code it with the 5 senses. Okay, so every human being is experiencing life through the 5 senses. What you see, hear, feel, taste, and smell. And so all I'm doing, I'm trained in helping people change their 5 senses. You know, maybe from black and white to color. If you've experienced a particular event and you've created a picture in black and white or color, you know, I could just change that, or small or big. We're going to play in a minute, okay? So the second point is the unconscious mind is the domain of memory and emotion. It is actually your powerful mind. Now, if you don't know anything about your unconscious, you know, I'm not even sure how many of you know that you have an unconscious mind. So the unconscious is where, you know, it protects us. It is the domain of memory. You know, our emotions sit in the unconscious. And so this is why when we're trained in the unconscious mind, an NLP trainer will be able to help, you know, bust those negative emotions that are sitting in the past and still plaguing you in your future and your present. We've covered the 5 senses. The 4th point, filled with self-management tools. I'm a great believer of helping someone through whatever it is they want to clear and then moving on. Okay. I don't want people hanging on to me. I do not believe in this, I'll see you next week, same time, same place for the next 3 years. That does not augur well for me. I want to be able to help people get rid of the negativity, the patterns perhaps that are stopping them. And once that's over, to give them these self-management tools and have them live a happy life and never see me again. It's the greatest compliment that I could ever have if a client saw me for a few sessions, walked away, and perhaps, intermittently said, hello, I've moved country, how are you, kind of, but not, hanging on to me. That would be the greatest compliment. And this is exactly what I create in my business. Okay, so the whole idea of self-management tools in corporate, to have people self-managing rather than having managers having to manage you, I don't understand that concept. Each of us has, our own ability to stand in our sense of self, and do what's important to us. The other part about NLP that is so amazing is it can be applied to all life contexts, whether it's your career, your family life, your relationships, spirituality, your hobbies and interests, whatever it is, making money, your wealth creation, prosperity. As soon as you learn a process, you're able to then apply it to the context of your life where you feel it's needed. Okay, so it's very much self-directed. I'm not telling you what to do. You're going to tell me what you want to clear and what you want to do. Okay, so this is how NLP works. And this is why it's so fascinating. It's so powerful and creates rapid results. So let me just play a little bit with you. You're probably wanting a little bit of an experience. So I'd like you to think about a time when you had fun. It can be last night, last week, a month ago, 5 years ago, when you were a kid. It doesn't really matter. Okay, I'd like you to get a picture. Get a picture of this particular event, this experience, a fun event. So you're smiling, having a good time. Okay, and I'd like you to now identify what's in that picture. Okay, so is the picture, is it small? So it's really far away, or is it big? Let's move it further back. And let's bring it closer. Notice what's happening in your body. Is it a black and white picture? If it is, I'd like you to make it color. Notice if you prefer this or that. If it's a color picture, I'd like you to make it a black and white. Notice what's happening inside you. Are you feeling better with, do you prefer one or the other? I'm sure you do. Perhaps if you could step into the picture and really experience it, and also maybe step out. Notice if you like sounds in your picture. Have you got sounds there already? The sound of music in the background, people talking, perhaps a bird chirping on the tree, or is it silent? What do you prefer? Now, these are some of the things that we change, and so that the person experiences something different. And when they have captured a really good moment, or they have captured a really good model of what works for them. So when we like something, we create it in a certain, a certain 5 senses model. When we dislike something, we create it in a very different way. So that's why we like it, and that's why we dislike it. So basically, that's all we're doing. But we understand this fundamentally as an NLP, trained NLP professional. I understand exactly where to go and what to change. It's as simple as that. So let me tell you, children love this. It's like playing, this is how we play with kids. I want you to just imagine, I want you to just change that. Easily done, because the brain is malleable. We have neuroplasticity. So if I am going to be focused on something positive, I can bet you, I'm going to wake up feeling so good. But on the days when I'm down, I know what my pictures and sounds and feelings are doing inside me, and I can easily change it. I remember a Friday night in Sydney, and those of you who've lived in Sydney, work life in Sydney starts to kind of wane by Friday night. We're all kind of, Friday afternoon, we're kind of thinking about which pub to go to for a drink. And, you know, silly me, I didn't think about it. I had made an appointment for 4:30, 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and I wasn't in the city. I had to come in by train. And I remember having a really, really big week. I was exhausted and I was thinking, oh, Sylvia, why did you do that? You know? So I just changed a few things in my mind to get that energy back. Okay. To get into the client's office feeling good. And when I stepped out, you know, I reorganized my internal self again. So this is about self-management tools, really easy peasy stuff. You know, everybody can do it. You don't need to be a psychologist. I am not a psychologist. Okay. So we don't need to go there. All right. So is it only effective for people with underlying skills and talents? Let me explain this to you. As human beings, we have what we call multiple intelligences. And these comprise IQ. We all know what IQ is about. It comes from logic and reasoning and data. We also have what we call EQ, emotional intelligence. So our emotional intelligence is based on how we feel, you know, how we relate to other people, how we communicate. You know, many people are not taught this. Many people don't have it inherently, you know, tuned in inherently in them. Okay, they don't know how to access it. We also have SQ, our spiritual intelligence, which comes from meaning and passion and inspiration. You know, this SQ was the thing that really drove me to find NLP. You know, IQ was fine. I was an EQ savvy person, you know, but when I was in banking for 13 years, towards the end, I started to feel I had no passion left. There was no purpose. What was I alive for? You know, what was I meant to be doing this lifetime? You know, I wasn't inspired by my work anymore because I'm a person who feels bored very quickly. I need that challenge all the time. And I'd been in banking, in, you know, managing balance sheet risk in treasury. I was in a very specialized role. And I thought to myself, geez, I can't do this for the rest of my life. You know, there was no meaning, you know, to purposely, you know, drive me into the future and propel me into my future. So, you know, what did I do? Now, this is what I'm saying. If you have inherent talents, okay, and you have inherent skills. So for instance, you're IQ driven and you are very high in IQ and you know your job really well and you love it. Perhaps EQ, SQ may be a problem because this is where NLP sits. Okay, so I could teach NLP to an astronaut. I could teach NLP to a brain surgeon. You know, I could teach NLP, you know, to anybody who has that inherent skill or talent. Now, if let's say, so this is why, let me just retract. This is why in organizations, you know, it's most of the time it's senior leadership that are very interested in NLP because they've already got the IQ and perhaps most of them the EQ, I'm hoping, you know, but the SQ is missing. They're still searching for that purpose. Some people are searching, some people are happy. Okay, so some need the EQ, some need the SQ. So if you are part of a senior leadership or a talent group, you know, that's fine. You've got the inherent talent and skills. What about the people perhaps in the lower rungs of the organization? You know, they definitely need to have some kind of a skill or a talent built first as a fundamental. You know, I often say to organizations, you know, build the upper echelon of your organization, build the senior first and then the middle rungs, you know, of the organization. And these people will be able to then trickle their knowledge down to the lower levels. You know, the most important at lower levels for people who haven't really tapped into a talent or skill that they're excited about yet. You know, they need a bit of nurturing on that front first. Then NLP is really makes an impact. Okay, so what I'm saying to you is your greatest leverage, if you have, you know, those fundamental substantial skills already, a data set, okay, then applying NLP on top of that becomes extremely powerful. But if this fundamental brick, you know, this foundation of the building, you know, hasn't quite found itself yet, okay, I would suggest, you know, get yourself some kind of expertise, some kind of talent or skill first, and then do NLP. Because NLP on its own, without application, is great to know, you know, and it's one of those courses you might go to and say, oh, this is really interesting. But I don't want that. I want you to apply it. I want you to apply it to something that's valuable for you. Okay, so there must be something. So for instance, someone like me, I applied my NLP knowledge and my skills, after I learned the methodology to the entire corporate arena, because I'd come from corporate. I was a leader myself. And so I understood, leadership language. I understood, what leaders go through. I understood, what organizations need. And so I applied my NLP knowledge and skills to the corporate context. So this is why I say you must have. So that's a really good question. It's, if you are thinking of taking NLP into your organization, I would say always start at the top. So can you do NLP yourself without a trainer or full certification course? Well, basically there are two types of, NLP processes. One, to do with the past and to remedy the past. So this is what I call the remedial side. This is something you need help with. You need a trainer for sure, someone to facilitate. You need an NLP coach, NLP trainer, to help you clear negative emotions. First of all, to identify what negative emotions are there and where, how old were you? That's all we need to know. Are you, experiencing some anger or fear that holds you back? Some beliefs, that limit you because that you installed those beliefs when you were young because somebody in your past told you you were not good enough. Something like that, okay? So what we do in the remedial side of NLP is we pattern interrupt. So we break the pattern. Those of us who grew up, many years ago, we're showing our age now, we had the LPs, the records where we had to be so careful that we didn't have long fingernails and wipe it really carefully, because the minute the record was scratched, you couldn't play it again. It would jump. So that the sound would jump, and this is exactly what we do in the unconscious. With these processes, we jump the record, we scratch the record, so you can't play it again. Okay, so the remedial side of it, absolutely, you need to go to a professional, clear that off once and for all. If you've got the right negative emotion that you want to clear, you've got the right event where it was installed, because we do need to know where it was installed, and we can help you with that. Then bang, one pattern interrupt, off you go. All right, and it doesn't need to be repeated or looked at again. Once it's done, it's done. It's very different for the future. So you could attend a course in the future to generate your future, to create a purposeful, and driven life. Things like goal setting, they're for the future, right? And wanting to align that, to purpose. However, when you're learning something new, it needs to be repeated. So we need repetition. Once you've learned the process, you need to practice and practice and practice until you get really good at it and it becomes a habit. Okay, so the remedial and the generative side of it, are quite different. You would still need to go to a training, some kind of course, a trainer could teach you a process, but from that process, once you know how to do it and you have the steps, your practice and getting perfect and getting good at it is up to you. Okay, so this is why some people who play at 100% at NLP courses get so much out of it, because they go home and they practice and they apply it to their context, and others sort of choose to sit back and say, oh, that was really interesting. But you know what, I'm too lazy, or it's, I'm going to focus on something else. Okay, so that's where you might not get the results that you intended to or you want to. So, that engagement in the first instance, if someone really wants something really badly, that's when NLP is going to really work well for you. Okay, so please write your questions and for the end of the session. So I hope you understand now the remedial and the generative difference between them. So this is the crux of NLP, the behavior change model. I'm sure you're all excited and waiting to hear, how do we change behaviors? So we are in external events all the time. Your external event right now is listening to the sound of my voice. You can see, what I look like on the screen. Perhaps you have the air conditioning on, running in the background. You're in your room. So this is the external event. Now, what we are all doing is we're filtering. We filter through our value systems, our beliefs, the language that we have learned, the memories that we have stored, and time, space, and energy. So we filter our external environment, and then we create the 5 senses. What you see, hear, feel, taste, and smell. So if I asked you, what does your mother look like? Your mother may not be there with you right now, but you have a picture of her in your mind. Okay, so that's how you stored, you filtered, and then you stored a map of your mother, through the 5 senses. And so this is what we're doing, every single second of the day. We are storing information, from our environment, wherever it is, we are. From that, we create a state of mind. If my maps and my filters have been, filtered well, and my maps are positive, then I get into a state of confidence, let's say, or I'm happy, or I'm enthusiastic, I'm excited. Okay. Or if I create maps that are not so positive, okay, maps for you that are negative, then that could create a negative state. Okay. I could be sad, I could be unhappy, I could be, dejected, whatever. Okay. Now that will instantly create a particular physiology. Your body will show it. You could either be frowning or slouching your shoulders, so if you go into an interview, let's say. So when I was a recruiter and a headhunter, I watched for physiology. As soon as a person comes in, and I'm sure those of you in recruitment, managers and leaders who are recruiting people, constantly, as soon as someone walks in, this person's a contender for this job. It's because they walk in with that confidence, or they walk in dragging their feet, or perhaps slouch, shoulders. So that state of mind internally has an impact on the external physiology. Now notice, from the filters, the maps, the state, and the physiology, everything comes through state. Notice that state is in yellow, it's a different color, and the arrows to the person, back to the person, come from state. So everything comes through state. When we change our state, we change our behavior. Okay, so the short and long answer of this is I'll change my state in order to change my behavior. So let me give you an example. If you're in customer service and someone screams at you, one of your customers says, your service is lousy, and you grew up having a belief that I am not good enough. Okay, and my mother used to scold me, and tell me that I was useless. And I've met people like this, okay? So what happens, I create my maps, my pictures perhaps in black and white, I have a heaviness in my chest, I don't feel good, so I get dejected, I get defensive, angry, I feel hopeless. And my physiology also shows it. Perhaps I'm clenching my fists, where my client can't see it, and my shoulders are hunched without me realizing. So in that defenseless or defensive state, and I feel hopeless, I then respond negatively. If you don't like our service, you can go elsewhere. Okay, so that's how a negative state is created from someone who's actually filtering, from the unconscious, limiting beliefs that stop them, that hinder them from success. And I'm sure we all know people like this. Perhaps we were like that once in our lifetime, But let's just look at the positive. If somebody has cleared their filters and realigned themselves, and they're more positive and they have a belief in themselves that I have the ability to provide good service, whatever the customer says, I create colorful pictures. I feel my body is tingling. Now I'm even more challenged. I have passion in me. I'm confident. I'm feeling calm. I'm sitting upright and I'm smiling, and I'm going to respond to this same customer. I'm so sorry to hear that. What can I do to help? So you see, the same customer, 2 different people, 2 different filters. And this is exactly what happens in life. Okay, so do you want to carry on, with negative filters, just not knowing what's in there? A lot of times people don't know, what's in their unconscious and what's driving them. Most of the time, this is what happens. People are being driven by the unconscious mind, and they have no idea what is in there. And that's the reason why NLP trainers are trained. We're professionally trained to help people identify where the leverage points are and then make that change. Okay, so if you had to know, in NLP, this is the big jigsaw puzzle of, how we work. There are 4 things to make behavior change: your filters, your maps, your state, your physiology. There's 4 things that we look for. We go into these 4 things and identify where the problem is. Is it your limiting beliefs? Is it your values? We realign your values, reprioritize. Let's look at that. Is it time? If you have a time problem and you're always running late, you know, it is your timeline. We have what we call a timeline inside us. You know, if you didn't know NLP and you went to a coach, they'll probably tell you, make a to-do list, you know, put your alarm on every day when, you know, as soon as you're done with one meeting, put your alarm for the next meeting. All that is conscious mind action, to-do list type. Okay, we don't get involved in that. That's something, you know, you can buy a book and go read it and do that. But what we do is we elicit your timeline. How do you sort for time? You know, what's your timeline looking like? What's the past and what's the future? You know, how does it look? And then we clean it up. We help clean up the timeline and then help you understand how to manage the timeline really easily. Okay, people feel anxiety, you know, with this COVID thing. Why is it some people felt anxiety and others didn't? The ones who felt anxiety probably had their timeline, you know, very, very short. So just do this for me now. If something is shortening, okay, and you're compressing it, how do you feel? You start to feel tight. How about if you lengthen it? How about if you lengthen this line inside you and you start to feel like, ah, I can breathe. Okay, and that's what we do. A simple, just everything in NLP is really simple. Simple little things like that. You know, stretch your timeline out, you know, bring it in, but you need to know how to elicit it in the first place. So I'll take questions about these at the end of the session. Something else we do, which you know, really, really important and fundamentally sort of like the building blocks of success, are success beliefs. Now, if you know, John Grinder and Richard Bandler, they modeled high performers. They understood how high performers would, what they were doing and how they were doing it. Okay, they realized that there were some success beliefs that they just believed. One of them, for example, I'm just giving you one, we have loads. You know, the person with the greatest behavioral flexibility will often take control. You know, if you are rigid and you only do things one way, you're not going to be in control. I can tell you that. So I totally believe the more flexibility I have in my behavior, I'm able to deal with different people, different clients. I'm able to close those deals. I'm able to attend to my teams. I'm able to, you know, speak with leadership. I'm able to go out to the press and, you know, and do a press conference. The more behavioral flexibility I have, you know, the more control I have over the situation. I have options. I have possibilities. You know, so inside of all of this NLP, you know, model, we have success beliefs. Okay, and we thrive on success beliefs. And to be honest, when people come to our courses, like corporate people, I had a sales manager who had a team of about, I don't know, 15, 20. This was in Sydney in early years when I first started. And after he learned NLP, he went back on his Monday morning meetings and he said, every Monday we're going to do something different. You know, initially the team were like, you know, what was this course about? Because they knew he'd attended a 7-day course. And, you know, so every time he brought a success belief out and he said, okay, we're going to discuss this today. And he just threw it up on the whiteboard. And he said, everybody, what do you think of this? And these rich conversations would start. And people would show, you know, what their maps were like. People would express how they felt about things. And so as managers and leaders, you know, suddenly you're getting all this information about your people, your team, you know, and it started to break down barriers. It started to build rapport, you know, and more as the team got into it, they so look forward to that 10 minutes inside of their sales meetings. So these are things that you could use, you know, immediately, you know, if you had a team, you know, you could use them with your children, you know, anybody, seriously, anybody. So a quick one on applications, like where would NLP be applied? Okay, so if you talk about the corporate context, you know, you could apply this to sales, to presentations, you know, to teamwork, you know, leadership, coaching, you know, on a personal level, self-development. People in organizations want to develop themselves. They want to find their purpose, you know. I've also gone into Changi Prison. I've done this, you know, work with inmates, you know, to help them get over their past. You know, the reason they're in prison is because they have a past, you know, and that past of behavior patterns has just, you know, come down the line from generation to generation without being interrupted. Those patterns were not interrupted. you know, so very often we're not born a certain way. We learn from our parents, you know, and so if our parents do something not so positive, you know, we learn that too, you know, and so criminal reform, therapy, parenting, military, I mean, this just can be applied to anything. Okay, it's once you learn the processes, it's just, you know, do A, B, C, D, and you get a result. So that's why NLP is hailed as very, you know, has very rapid change. For individuals, if anyone did an NLP course, you know, this is what you could expect, you know. A lot of times people have problem with decision making. Why is that? Decision making comes from internal conflict. You know, if you know, a part of me says I want to do this, but another part is pulling at me in a different direction, and it says, oh, I'm not sure, I'm not good enough. You know, the limiting beliefs pop up. You know, so there are different, I've met people with 10 different parts running around inside them. And by the way, this is how people get suicidal. Okay, they have more than 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parts in them, you know. And basically, you know, can you just imagine if there were 10 people running around inside you? You know, at one point, you know, this part takes over and says, you know, let's do this. And then the next part is like a Jekyll and Hyde, you know, sort of personality disorder. And so this is what we help people integrate. As they start to integrate the parts, they become whole again, one whole person again. Okay, and when that happens, they're able to make decisions really easily. Okay, so if you are also able to recognize, you know, now that you know where behavior change comes from, you know, where are those leverage points and where is the problem, you know, as far as you're concerned. You might say, oh, Sylvia, I know time is a problem for me. I know my belief systems, there's something there that's bugging me. I know I've got fear in me. You know, you might say that. You might start off by talking about that, you know. So recognizing, once you understand the full behavior change model, recognizing where you need, you know, to make some changes, just some tweaks in order for you to make, you know, very easy change. Individuals also, you know, can expect to gain flexibility to address their changing scenarios. So right now with COVID-19, I suppose, you know, we are all having to do this, to be adaptable, to be relevant, to stay relevant, you know, as we change and change. I wasn't doing online programs before, but, you know, when we had circuit breaker last year in March, you know, people said, oh, so bored at home. I wasn't, you know, I was recreating everything to the online space. I mean, I was busy, you know, just thinking about designing new programs. And, you know, I knew this was going to happen. So you need to stay relevant. You need to be adaptable and flexible in order to address these changing and you know, changing scenarios and be able to accept and be resilient. You could also for sure become a very powerful and confident communicator, because half of the NLP model is about language. Okay, and it's about language of the unconscious mind, not necessarily words, verbal, but also non-verbal. Okay, so we pay attention to the non-verbal language of what we are, you know, giving out to people on the outside. And of course, it will enhance personal relationships, because we teach you, and in the very, very first segment, how to build rapport. Whether you like your client or not, how do you build rapport, you know, with your client, with your spouse, with your children? You know, building rapport is a big one. And as a result of doing all of this, changing your leverage points, okay, and changing filters and maps and the state and physiology, that's what creates high performance. Because when the remedial stuff has been sorted, you know, you then are able to go out with clarity and go out into the future thinking, now I know what to do. Now I feel purposeful. Now I feel passion inside me and I'm ready to go. Okay, so the whole concept of improving mental health and well-being, you know, is at the core of NLP, because we work, you know, you're working with yourself. What about corporations, you know, who do NLP? What the big thing, and I know clients who've said that, my CEO, you know, clients who've said that, who, you know, went through a whole culture change in their organization, you know, the one thing one of the CEOs said to me, Sylvia, the biggest thing that you've helped me with is you've helped me create a common language, you know, that focuses on solutions and options, because everybody down the line understands these processes and understands the technical language, the jargon. NLP can be quite jargonistic, you know, but the technical jargon, when you use a word, you know, people then understand it immediately. There is no need to explain. and so this technical jargon starts to get into the culture of the organization, and people then start to communicate at the same level. They know exactly what you mean. Okay, of course, goal setting models for KPIs, and more importantly, it's not just about goal setting, but when we set goals, we are also aware of what behaviors we need in order to achieve those goals, and what states of mind people need to create in order to do those behaviors. Now, where it falls down currently when you're not trained in NLP is most managers don't know that states exist. So if you are not in a proper state of mind, you're not able to go out and change your behavior and then achieve your KPI, your goal. So most people sit in action plans and behaviors and their goals, but they don't have that one step further back, which is creating a state. How do I create a state of confidence if I'm not a confident person? So that's the part where NLP comes in. If any of you have watched Tony Robbins or been to his programs, Tony is a great artist when it comes to state management. Okay, he focuses a lot on that because it really sits at the core of NLP. If I'm in a good state, you saw the leverage points for behavior change. If I am in a good state, I'm able to go out and change my behavior. Okay, and also organization cultures are aligned, and everyone then goes out with a unified approach. So, these are the things that help you beat the competition, because these models will start to ignite purpose, and people start to feel so motivated. They're like a tiger by the tail, you can't catch them, and so everybody's just running of their own volition. No manager needs to help them get motivated. They are motivated of their own. And that's what I mean by self-management tools. Okay, so let's hear from you. Are there any questions from what I've just shared with you? Very high level take on NLP. All right, so Charles.
Yes, okay, thank you, Sylvia. That was very insightful. So we have had some questions come in during the session. So if it's okay with you, I'll ask some questions on behalf of the audience.
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay, so one here is it possible to identify leverage points on our own, or do we need to work with an NLP trainer?
Sometimes you may know about, the fear that you have because you identify that your behaviors are stopping you from going out into the unknown or trying a new, project or job or whatever you want to do. So sometimes people already know, others don't. And that's when you probably need, either way, even if you know, you need an NLP trainer to help you get rid of that, whatever that's bugging you. But identification, perhaps, some people do come in to see me, already quite aware of what they want to change.
Okay, thank you. And I guess a question from me, Sylvia. Before you got into NLP, did you sit down with a trainer yourself in order to sort of start this part of your career?
No, it's so interesting you asked me that, Charles, because I was living in Sydney at the time, and I used to go for a walk across the Harbour Bridge. I was in the suburb just across the bridge, and a friend of mine, John used to come over he loved walking on a Wednesday night. I still remember because his partner used to go for art classes. So after dinner, 6:37, with two of us would go for a walk, 3-hour walk across the bridge, stop, have coffee, and come back by 9, 10 o'clock at night. And he was highly intuitive. He'd done NLP like 20 years before. And one day he would just intuit stuff. He'd ask me questions. How's your day at work? I was still in the bank. How was your day at work? And I'm like, and he'd ask me something very specific. And I'm like, oh my God, why did you ask me that? It's almost like he was a fly on the wall. And he said, I intuit a lot. You must know that by now. He was a very close friend. And I said, yeah. And so more and more, I got to understand that John knew. He was almost like he was in my mind. So one day he said to me, you should go do NLP. You're very, a natural communicator. And I think it's time for you to change, career paths. He knew I was looking. And that was it. That night I went back and I Googled all the NLP sites that I could find. And I was so excited, couldn't sleep. It was like singing to my heart. I was just like, oh my God, this is for me, all the language and the things and that was it. I'm very impulsive. So as soon as my heart sings, that's it. I decided I was going to take a year off And I took a year off from January to December of 2002, and I said, I'm going to do NLP. I signed up for a course, and that's it.
Oh.
Not everyone's like me.
You haven't looked back since, by the sounds of things. No?
I'm a bit shocked actually, because I'm a person who loves a challenge, and I thought, I wonder what next after NLP. And many people who know me say, you've been doing this for 19 years, aren't you bored? But I'm not. Every client is different. Every organization is different. There is a challenge, for me to get this done quick, and for me to make sure that they're back on their feet and they get what they want. Oh, I absolutely love it. I'm still excited about my work. And this is what I say. When you have purpose, you're meant to be doing something. This is exactly what I mean. So if any of you share my sentiments, you're in the right place, and this is your life, But if you're still searching, and if it's still, question marks above your head, keep moving, keep searching.
Well, I can certainly tell that you're very passionate about the subject. That's for sure. So we've just had another question come in now. Let's just read that one out. Hi, Sylvia. You briefly talked about changing state with the customer service example. Could you elaborate on the how, please?
Well, the how, you see, your neurology understands a state of confidence, let's say. Okay, so you've been confident in the past. As soon as your neurology has felt something, okay, and people say to me, oh, I've never felt confidence, I don't know. You just need to think about a time in the past when you felt that confidence, and associate your neurology in it. So let me do a quick one with you now. Think about a time when you were happy, everybody. It's for you. Think about a time when you were happy. As soon as you think about that, you have a smile on your face. Your neurology has just associated in that time, and it knows what it feels to be happy. So all you need to do is just ramp it up. If it's a 6 out of 10, just ramp it up to 7, 8, 9, 10, capture it, and then reuse it. So capture it, save it somewhere, and then reuse it. Every time you need it, fire off that anchor, trigger it off. Got it. That's it. It's so simple.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people I see walking around Singapore with generally either frowning or looking quite discerned.
Yes.
I think if more people smiled, it would probably change their outlook on the day ahead.
Absolutely.
Okay. Another question that's just come in here. So, is it self-sustainable? Do you need to take refresher courses, or once you've completed a course with yourself, is that all you need to know to then move forward with NLP?
Okay, so remedial stuff, okay, it's permanent. It's fast change, sustainable, permanent, no need to address it anymore. So if you have fear right now and we address it and it's gone and that's it, over and done, finished, you don't have to come back to do that. Sometimes people come back because of the generative stuff. So I'll give you an example. I had a very senior guy, he's a general manager for City Rail in Sydney many years ago. And he had bought like a package of 7 sessions, and we'd finished all the remedial stuff. And he said, teach me a few things. How do you see, City Rail in the old days, I don't know, I suppose still now, was very highly unionized. And he was the general manager in charge of all, unions and stuff. And I still remember it was a Friday, and, he was going into a really big meeting on a Monday. And he said, Sylvia, help me with that Monday meeting. I don't know how to start, how to, attend to this thing. It is a huge, huge problem that we're going to be facing, blah, blah, blah. So often senior people, use me for things like that. And I'll say, okay, well, you're going to use these processes. So then the NLP is more than 100 processes. So I'll say, all right, let's pick this one and that and merge them and see. And, at the end of that session, he said, oh my God, I'm so ready to meet them right now. I could go out of this session and it's, that's it. Bob's your uncle. I'm like, good. So Monday was it was a breeze. He wasn't, sort of thinking, worried, I've got to, how am I going to do this? So in terms of sustainability, yes, when you do remedial stuff, you don't have to readdress the whole thing again. Instead, in terms of the future, the generative stuff, you may come back, it's sustainable as well. You may come back for more processes. You may want, find that these are so amazing that you want to learn more and come back for more processes. That's the only reason you might want to come back.
Okay. We have another question from the audience. This is around time. So when completing a course, how long is it before you start to notice the benefits of the training that you provide?
Very, very fast. All right, so we've got to understand that everybody comes in at different levels. Okay, so somebody who's never done a personal development course at all, this would be very new for them. So it's kind of like reorientating their mind, refocusing, kind of like the compass, redirecting the compass internally, to focus on what they want. So sometimes those people would take longer than someone who's a meditator, who already knows how to visualize, somebody who's already done some personal development courses. They would just like, snap it up real quick, So it all depends. Most of the time, you see, the good thing about trainings is that even if you don't get it fully, people who have got it fully in the class. And by the time the classes are ended, you're kind of buddying up with them and you're excited, you could then elicit them, because when people come to NLP, they want to be coaches, they want to be better managers. So they're very excited to coach someone through stuff, So if you say, I didn't quite get that, can you coach me through it? Then perhaps. So that's one model where they might turn to a buddy after the class and say, I didn't quite get that. Can you do that with me again? Or some people just come straight into me for one-on-ones, maybe a few sessions to say, Sylvia, I now know where you're coming from. I've redirected, but I feel that this is still there. Can we do some one-on-ones just to, nip it in the bud and get rid of them? So different models, different, yeah. Often, like my Series A class goes for 2 hours every Saturday, for instance, for 4 modules. So that's just 8 hours. But I see tremendous change after 8 hours, it's incredible.
I was just about to ask, how many weeks is a full course, a full NLP course with yourself?
Well, so Series A is a starting point. People come into that, to eradicate the past. And I created this when COVID happened last year, and to address anxiety and all the stuff I talked about with the remedial side, So Series A is about remedying the past and getting rid of stuff. Then people may choose to go to Series B, which is another 2 hours times 4 modules, which is another 8 hours. And that's about creating a future. So I'm running Series B right now. In fact, tomorrow will be module 2 for one of my groups. And it's amazing how once the past is sorted, then people are now totally focused on the future. So I use different processes to help them gain clarity and create a mind map so that they know, what their purpose is and where they're heading. If people want to, become NLP practitioners, which is the first level of, running your own coaching business or being an amazing, manager who is a coach, then they come into a face-to-face 7-day program. So that's internationally certified.
And they can do that through yourself, Sylvia?
Yes, yeah. And that's face-to-face. So, people overseas will have to come in and fly into Singapore when our borders open.
Or hopefully sooner than later.
Yes.
Okay, I've just looking at the time. It's 12:24, so I think we'll wrap up now. But yeah, thank you very much for a very insightful session.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
And you're welcome. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Heritage Partnership is a partner practice of St. James's Place. So we specialise in bespoke, goals-based financial planning to ensure our clients feel good about working towards their financial objectives. St. James's Place is a FTSE 100 company. It's one of the largest and the most respected businesses in the UK, as well as Asia. And the Heritage Partnership is one of the largest practices in Asia. Aside from wellness sessions, such as the one we've run this morning, we also host various different educational webinars and workshops on an array of financial planning topics. Hopefully you've found that to be of use this morning. That brings us to the final part of the webinar. We're going to just complete a very brief survey, just so that we can gauge how much knowledge you've learnt and understood this morning. So the survey should be on the screen now, and we'll give ourselves around 30 seconds to complete that. Okay. Okay, thank you for doing that. In terms of our next installment for our webinar series, we will have one coming up on the 12th of August. So, oh, sorry. Yeah, so sorry, we'll be having one coming up on the 12th of August. This is to talk around succession planning, building a lasting legacy for family businesses. If this is of interest, there's a QR code there to scan in order to register your interest in that. Okay. And just to highlight again that this recording session today will be available on demand, and the link can be sent to you in the next couple of days. For any questions about the topic that Sylvia talked about this morning, do feel free to send an inquiry through to thp@sjpp.asia. And in order to learn more about the Heritage Partnership, the website is theheritagepartnership.asia. Do feel free to connect with us on social media. So we are on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, as well as YouTube. And once again, I'd just like to say a special thanks to our guest speaker this morning, Sylvia Fernandez, for a really insightful session. I hope you now are more familiar with NLP and the theory behind it. Sylvia, before we go, just a few final words for the audience from yourself.
Thank you. Yes, I hope you realize that, we live a lifetime. Yeah, and it's not very long. It goes so fast these days. So, it's great if you had some passion and, fueled by purpose, So living an automatic routine life isn't the way to go. There's just so much ahead of you. Create yourself as a purposeful individual before you leave Mother Earth. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for attending. Enjoy the weekend ahead. Hope to see you again soon.